Mall of America. It's home to world-class shopping, great dining, and amazing attractions and events. And these are our stories, presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism. Welcome to So Much More. I'm your host for today's podcast, Jill Renslow. I'm joined by Dan Jasper, my co-host. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Jill.
And our fans are in for a treat today because one of our Mall of America favorites is here to join us. It's Roshini Rajkumar, a crisis specialist, C-suite advisor, and mainstage speaker. Her core clients include Fortune 500 brands and their leaders. She hosts the Crisis Files podcast, which drops weekly and is currently in season 3. Roshini and who's who of guest voices from around the world dissect hot topics of the day to deliver solutions for our crisis. So welcome, Roshini.
It's so great to be with you. Lots to talk about.
Well, if anybody is ready to get some tips on communicating in the business setting, but also tips that will work across all forms of communication, whether you're preparing for a meeting, if you're going to an event, if you're presenting to an audience, these tips are really going to come in handy, as well as we're going to explore things for LinkedIn profiles, all the things that will benefit you. So definitely stay tuned to listen to this episode and share it with your friends and family and your colleagues that could use these tips. I think it helps us all become better communicators, because we just stepped away from a session that we had with our colleagues and having a Biz Speak presentation by Roshini. And so let's jump right in and let's talk about the topic that we just spoke with our team and giving them some tips. So kick us off.
Well, it's so important that people don't take their audiences for granted. So often people get really caught up in their own preparation. Maybe they're stressed, maybe it's a new client, whatever the case may be, and they're not really thinking about what's in front of them. There are so many ways you can get details. I call them audience data points about your audience, whether it's one or many. We have everything online from LinkedIn. I recommend that people Google the person or the brand that they're meeting with, or both. So you've got LinkedIn, you've got the websites of anyone you're dealing with. You have social media, those digital profiles. And then let's just go back to old school. You've got your colleagues who may know people or the person you're about to meet with or the brand you're about to meet with. So that audience analysis piece is really crucial. And the more you know about your audience, naturally, any stress kind of starts to melt away.
And I think it's such an easy piece of advice, but all of us are so busy that we just sometimes just jump in from one meeting to the next, or, last minute going to an event and maybe you're calling a friend to try to get some updates, but it really doesn't take long and it can make a really big difference. So let's unpack a little bit about your overarching kind of theme, what you did with the Biz Speak, and talk specifically about the I.A.P, because this is the formula that you use to break it all down for the people that you are consulting with to help them become better communicators. So help us understand what I.A.P stands for.
So I started using the I.A.P probably naturally without knowing that's what it was in my former career as a television reporter, because every day I had a different kind of audience I was interviewing, dealing with, but then had to turn it around for my viewers in whatever market that was. So whether I was covering a murder, a grand opening of a business, or possibly flu shots, think about all the different audiences. But my audience, the viewers, similar audience, whoever watched the particular station I was working at. But when I'm doing these interviews, I might be talking with doctors, regular people, kids, teachers, you name it. So I have to really make sure I'm getting the information from them, or I had to make sure that I can then come and put the story together for the audience that was my viewership, right? So I use that as an example to just kind of say, you don't always have all the answers. So be kind of easy on yourself and be a curious citizen. So that's some of the best way to go. So when I launched my business in early 2006 and I was creating the content that I was going to then turn around, coach, speak about on stages, this I.A.P formula kind of just naturally evolved. And I've been teaching it now for more than 19 years. So I stands for intent. A is the audience analysis, and P stands for powerful performance. And I was with the MOA team this morning, and you all were just eating it up. It was great. I could see light bulbs going off as people were saying, oh, yeah, I have this audience. I should be thinking about this. The intent line is where it starts. That drives the whole formula, the I. The I is about you, the communicator. Or if you're co-presenting with a colleague, it's about you and your team, or you and your colleagues. But then the A, the audience analysis, so important. What are all of the data points you know or can find out about your audience? So then you can have a powerful performance that is about the audience, not about you.
I think that's so important. I've seen many people give keynote speeches or presentations, and once in a while it feels like it's about them and not intended for the audience, and it just doesn't hit home, right? It feels more like a performance than a connection.
Exactly. And I do use some terms of performance, but in the right way. We want to choreograph your communication moment, whatever that is, a presentation, a keynote, even an email. You can I.A.P. What's my launch? What's in the middle? How am I going to close this out? And that applies to every kind of communication moment.
And I thought it was really interesting when we were going through the exercises around intent. Out of the gate, a lot of times people thought they knew what the conversation was going to be about, and they quickly jumped in there. Well, this is what the meeting's going to be about. But as you challenge them of really, what is the action that you want out of this communication, out of this conversation, this meeting? After they thought about it and you helped them boil down, it was simplicity around what is the action and what do you truly want as this next step. For example, we were talking with one of our sales leaders, and at first it was like, I just want to make sure that they're informed about what's happening here at the mall. We all want to be able to have the high level conversation where it's just touching base, but is that really the intent and what you want to walk away with? No, like that's maybe the starter that warms up the conversation, but it's like, where do you want to take that? And really it's, you want another meeting. You want to be able to close a deal eventually, but we know that it takes time to build a relationship, but really get to the crux of what is the intent of this conversation. And I think it's going to really make more meaningful conversations, more purposeful conversations, and you're actually going to have that follow-up opportunity.
Precisely.
That also shapes your own thought process as well. And when we were going through that exercise, in my mind, because I had already figured out what my intent was, I was all of a sudden doubting myself, going like, wait a minute, that's not what I should be leading with, right? I was looking more at an end result as opposed to where I wanted them to go.
And it's really easy when you think about anyone out there who sells. You have a sales cycle that could take 6, 7 meetings, 5 follow-ups by email before you get that client or before it crashes. Hopefully it doesn't take that long and then it crashes. But the first meeting is never going to have the same intent line as the third or the fifth meeting. The first meeting is about capturing their attention. It's making them want a second meeting, or it's showcasing your differentiators. So I always say the intent line should be built around a strong action verb. What am I doing? It's a short phrase, no ands, no punctuation, especially no commas in that intent line. And I get really specific about that. It might sound like, oh, what do you mean no commas, Roshini? Try it on your own. I.A.P. something that you have coming up. And if you cannot put that intent line into a short, succinct phrase with a strong action verb that has no commas, then you need to go back to the drawing board and really understand what is it I'm trying to do here with this audience.
Absolutely. And I think now it's more important than ever with so many people working remotely or coming back into the work environment now that businesses are changing their work from home policies, and be able to really prepare to really connect with your team. It's meaningful, it's important, and it really helps people propel their professional experiences forward because those connections are extremely important. So have you seen a shift with your client base in having more focus on that to prepare their employees to come back, or what are you seeing or hearing in the marketplace?
Definitely. And a lot of my clients are in situations already, even before the 2025 push that we're hearing and the return to office. And there have been some negative headlines, frankly, for some very large brands. But even prior to that, they were mandating 2 to 3 days in the office. And then based on the specific role, there might have been some exceptions to that. No matter where your workplace is, whether there's a hybrid situation, whether it's all in office or mostly remote, you can still think about who's the audience that I'm dealing with in any particular moment. Is it my internal audiences, my own colleagues, my boss? Am I on screen with them or am I in person with them? These are two questions that back in the day, whichever day that means, whatever, definitely for my age bracket, back in the day, we weren't asking, am I on screen with someone all the time? We're asking that now. You're always asking, is this a virtual meeting? Is this an in-person? Do I have to fly in to meet you? Do I need to get in my car and drive 30 minutes to meet you in some cases? Whatever it is, always try to find out the physical setting. So that is part of your choreography as well as part of your audience analysis. Because if you know that you are in one place with a couple of your coworkers and then 5 of your other coworkers all together in another place, there are going to be different things you need to be thinking about. And I still am seeing people who don't light and set up their own particular screen situations where they're way down at the bottom of the camera or they're backlit. There's a window behind them and it's like blinding to have to look at them on the screen.
So look at the screen to see what it looks like.
Exactly. Even if it's send a meeting invite to your spouse or your roommate or your child and say, honey, how does this look? Can you see me? Is it annoying to look at me? Am I backlit? All of those things. Can you hear me? These are the kinds of simple things which I cannot believe 5 years since, the world knew the 2020 pandemic that I'm still saying, are you lighting your space well? Can we hear you? Or are people looking up your nose in your shot? So I know it's kind of funny, but we've all seen it. I know you have.
And it's still happening. I'm in a class currently where there's about 7 people participating. One person constantly, clearly their laptop is incorrect, and it is looking up the face. And the other person, people don't think of this virtually, right, is your stature and your body posture, because there's one person on these classes, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to upset our sound technician, but this person lays back during the whole meeting, and I'm just like, are you awake? Hello?
They're comfortable. They have found a comfortable
They're
spot.
very comfortable.
Maybe too comfortable. Yeah. So, we sure need to keep the humor in these times because not every workplace is the same. And people have varying levels of anxiety when we're talking about return to office. I'm at Gen X. I love in person, but I'm also a business owner. So my office is in my home, but I do get to get out every day for various clients. I'm on screens with clients every day. And I also go out of town for my own home base to be with clients. So I have a combination of great worlds, and I'm very fortunate and feel blessed about that. And I have a choice in the matter. Not everyone has a choice in the matter, but we can control how we prepare for the different settings. And so this IAP formula, think of it as your friend.
So we also talked a little bit about, not with the larger group, but just the 3 of us, about going to events, because events are back. It's great. Love being with people, but those big events give a lot of people anxiety because they're going into a space where they might not have a lot of familiar faces. And we have a tendency to gravitate towards those familiar faces, and we might not go beyond that. What is your advice for whether, I think it's across the board. You don't have to be a young professional. I think all professionals or, entering that space get anxiety if they don't know the audience. So what are your tips for those type of interactions?
And we've all done it, right? You go to what's comfortable. Yep. You go to who you know. If Mall of America buys a table at an event, everyone at Mall of America is at that table and they go right to that table. Instead of, let's go see what this bank over there has. Let's go see what this retail brand has. Oh, that's a retail brand that's not in the mall. Maybe we want to go talk with them. So my sense, depending on the industry you're in and the event, is always try to go to the other. And even if your brand does buy a table at an event, can you invite others that are non your brand to sit at that table? So right there, even in that 8 to 10 person table, your team is getting to know people they need to get to know, whether they're your clients, future clients, vendors, whatever they are. So whatever these events are, you're not going to boil the ocean, as they say. I don't like to use cliche, but this is where it does make sense. Pick 1 or 2 things you want to accomplish. What's your intent? Is it, I want to meet 2 new people that don't work with me, don't work at my brand, And that's it. It could be that simple. I just want to meet 2 new people, not even putting more of an expectation on it. Then, hey, maybe it's an association that your brand, their brand are both members. Maybe the end of the event, you can say, are you going to next month's breakfast? I'd love to look for you there. And little by little, you're starting to forge a new relationship. That could become a lifelong friend. It could become a client. You never know. But it starts with just one small intent line.
During our conversation too, Jill, you made a really good point about what a role for a leader might be in that circumstance. You want to share that?
Yeah, I think we can play a role in those bigger events or things that have the tables of sponsors and things like that. Because a lot of times we'll see a lot of familiar faces and faces that our other team members don't know. So as leaders, let's take that opportunity to introduce our younger team members or those that might not attend the events as much and introduce them to a few people that you know, or go together and meet some people together that we don't know, because it'll help show them that it's not as scary as it might feel. And you're going to make some really great connections. And the big piece about it too for me is follow up. I mean, it's so easy just to connect on LinkedIn afterwards, remind the person where they met you so that just jogs their memory, and then have a regular cadence of outreach. And maybe there's some commonalities where you, to your point, Roshini, like you're going to see them at another event, like looking forward to seeing you, and I'll try to connect there, and just trying to find those undertones. Because I think when you have those intro conversations, learn a little something about them that will help stick in your mind about how they differentiate against somebody else that you might have met, so that you have that purpose to follow up. Maybe you learn about their kids going to college, or that they just got a new dog, or that they just shopped at a store at Mall of America that they love. Like just those little tidbits where it makes it more personable, and you can start really building those connections. Because I'm a huge believer in long-term relationships versus short-term transactions, because I think those transactions will eventually come when you really invest in a true relationship. And you do that by just getting to know one another and listening and following up and making those connections.
Can I ask another question about our workshop we did today? There was an exercise you did that I thought was really interesting. You had all of our team members rate themselves, both how they saw themselves and how others see them in terms of the wow factor. It was a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the top, right? I desperately wanted to mark myself down as a 10.
Because you are.
But my Minnesota humbleness said I can't go above a 9, right? And talk about that a little bit. We had somebody who stood out and somebody else. Can you talk through that exercise? I thought it was interesting.
Thank you. So I created the Wow Factor quiz several years ago. It's a very simple quiz, and I use it to help my clients analyze themselves. And at the same time, I can analyze them based on that very simple question. 2 questions. The first being, what would you give yourself on this powerful presence scale of 1 to 10? And then what would others give you? And this is something that all of your listeners can do right now on a piece of paper. What would you give yourself? What would others give you? And there were some people in the room. We had kind of an array of responses. And I hope everyone can give themselves a 10. When you give yourself a 9 or a 10, you're not saying you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. You're saying my inner narrative tells me I'm a 10, so that I can go out and do what I need to do in my job, in my personal life, at my best capacity. So it's really about you. It's this inner number you're doing to help lead you, guide you. Now, if you don't feel inside you're a 9 or a 10, I'm not asking you to lie, but I hope you can aspire to be that 10. Because if you give yourself a 5, a 6, a 7, then ask yourself, what does your boss expect you to be? What number do your clients expect you to be? And everyone always says 10. And so then you've just given yourself a 6. Well, there's a lot between a 6 and a 10. What money are you leaving on the table? What influence are you leaving on the table? Because inside you're saying you're a 6. So there are ways to grow that number for yourself if you truly feel you're a 6 today. And some of that is your own confidence building. It's using the I.A.P to have better results. It doesn't mean you're an extrovert or an introvert. This is about inner narrative. That is what this number is getting at. And hopefully you see yourself as a 10, others see you as a 10, and then when you're out there doing things in the world, that's fueling you from the inside to deliver in that way.
I'd be really curious if we went back and had our team rescore themselves after we kind of went through the conversation. I would hope that they would be higher, because I think all of our team members are 9 and 10 because they show up. They're great brand ambassadors. And it was interesting as I reflect on how I scored myself. I feel like the team would score me higher than I score myself, because I feel like the team feels I'm a good representation for the brand, but I feel like I always have room to grow, and I always do that to myself. Like I'll give myself a 9 because I'm like, I'm not perfect. Like I still want to push myself, but when I look at it, I'm like, no, but I'm pretty proud of who I am.
Yes.
So then I have to
and you are a 10.
that.
And here's the thing. It isn't saying you're perfect or that you don't have room to grow. By giving yourself the 10, you're saying I'm actively seeking ways to always be a 10 or to be a 10 plus. So you're absolutely giving yourself that inner confidence to continue to learn and grow. And it's really interesting because I've been doing this wow factor quiz now for maybe 12 years. The I.A.P came right out of the gate when I launched my business. The wow factor it sort of birthed from me, from all the work I was doing coaching people. And then it really, because I talked about inner narrative at the very get-go with everybody, then I said, how do I quantify this in a simple test? And it has been powerful. And I do hope you go back maybe in a couple months at a future group meeting when I'm not there and have everyone pull out the sheet from today, and before they even pull that out, have them rate themselves today and then go back and look at what they said on the day that we were all together. And hopefully everyone went up in their number.
Well, and that's what I love. You gave us a lot of tools today to help us go back, revisit, and there are things that you can revisit quarterly, annually, to see where everybody's at and to bring in new team members. And so thank you for those tools. And I think it was just a great thought starters to get us rolling and to really be able to reflect and to build on them. So I think it's great. And I want to get into—
And you probably noticed though too, Jill, none of it was rocket science. I mean, I'm proud of creating the content I've created for the Biz Speak Talk and the Wow Factor quiz, but they are ways— my approach is, how can I simplify my now 30 years of being on stages, 25 years as a broadcaster? And I am not expecting people to be as comfortable in every form of communication as I am. But what I'm saying is, this isn't rocket science. You too can find your authentic voice. You can find your way to shine, but we just need to be pretty even-handed and realistic about what is out there and how you do need to make it about your audience and how you do have to have an inner narrative that's positive in order to get really good results. So if someone is, let's say, envious of someone because they're a $2 million a year seller, well, what are you doing to make yourself that? Because probably you have it within you. You're just not looking in the right areas.
And what I love is these tools are applicable to being a parent as well.
Yes.
It's not just in the business setting, because as a parent with college students, my wheels were spinning about being able to have intent as you go on these conversations. I know my audience, and I know how it's motivating.
And each of your children is probably very different from one another, right?
Yes, it is great. So I do want to get into LinkedIn, but I'm very curious of your response to the fact of, a lot of people think you have one shot for that first impression, but I know you have a little bit different thought in your philosophy around this. I would love for you to share with our viewers and listeners about the impression side of things.
It is true that an opinion is formulated about you within those first few seconds. Knowing that and not getting stressed by it are two different things, right? We want to set ourselves up for success, but let's say it wasn't a great first outing. It doesn't mean there's not a recovery or rehab to happen. The key is that you put it on you to make the improvement in the next encounter, whatever that is. Hopefully you'll use the I.A.P formula, get to know the audience better, so that when you re-encounter, you're more on point, you're more influential, just because you're making it more about them and not yourself. But I would say never think that all is lost. And when we think about some of the greats in the world, when you think about, I want to go football for a moment, Tom Brady, definitely considered one of the GOATs of football. He was not a first choice draft pick. He was, in fact, there are some really interesting stories about his college days that you would never imagine that guy would turn into who we know as this guy. So use those examples. For my own personal research, I am constantly researching people who seem to have risen to the tops of their careers or of their industries. And for sure, you will find they were never perfect. The road was long, the road had curves, and they got over 1 to 50 hardships to get to where they are today. And that is really confidence building for me. And what I try to look at it as, if I were going to go down a road that I just read, let's say a Heidi Klum, who is, was a supermodel and then started business lines and is on TV and Project Runway, all these things. If I can read her story and maybe avoid a pitfall or be inspired by something that she did in her production side, because I'm a content creator also, wow, that might shorten my learning curve. That's how I look at it. It's not a jealousy. It's not a trying to be exactly like her, but it's using other people's stories as examples or for lessons.
I love the lessons learned. You
do
can
too.
always take something away and build on your success, because I think sometimes when we don't have a successful first impression or first opportunity, sometimes that gives us fire to even want it more and not to give up, but to really fight for what you want to achieve and you want to go after.
One of my favorite lines from one of my mentors is, there are no losses, there are only wins and learnings. And it's so true,
agree.
because you learn from everything you do.
Well, we just learned a lot from you. So we're taking this out. And Dan and I thought we had pretty decent LinkedIn profiles.
I don't want to go here.
We thought we were like somewhat good. But then I learned there was one major person that I wasn't connected with as we were going through this exercise, which was hilarious. One of the owners of the mall, which I was like, this is ridiculous. So don't worry, I took care of that right away. But give us some of those pointers on our LinkedIn profiles that people are probably overlooking because they're probably really obvious, but things to really fine tune to make sure that we're maximizing our opportunity to connect with the right people.
Well, one of the myths that I want to debunk right here on So Much More is LinkedIn is not just for when you're looking for a job. It is absolutely helpful for when you're looking for a job, but more and more, I'm hoping that myth has been left behind, because that LinkedIn is being looked at while you're sleeping. What story is it telling? And are you controlling the narrative, or something or someone else? So when you look at that LinkedIn profile, you've got different components of it. And what I call that background behind your headshot is the wallpaper. This is a really great place for personality. And if you have a brand like Mall of America that's very fun and vibrant and international, what wallpaper can be back there? You could do your logo. That's totally viable. Is it a scene from a place you visited? Is it a scene from one of your big events? That could be the wallpaper. So what's on point? What's authentic to you and your brand? That's your wallpaper. Your headshot, I want you looking out at us, not a side view, not a bent over view. Let it be not your whole body, maybe half to a headshot worth of your body. And that's what we want to see. And if you look, I tell my clients to avoid really dark colors and white in those headshots. So have some color in there, not huge patterns. You don't want it to be distracting, but look straight at us and have either a closed or an open, or not open mouth, but teeth smile with teeth or slight smile without teeth. But unless you are what's his name? John, the guy who sadly has made a complete advocacy after losing his son, went missing. It's not America's Most Wanted, but he helps find missing children. He's a serious guy. He's probably not full grin on his profile. Most of us are not that. So really go with what can authentically go with your brand and yourself. That's your picture. And then a real quick tip is those bio bullets right under your name. This is a lost opportunity that I'm seeing even with people who are great posters on LinkedIn. How many really good algorithm searchable by algorithms of LinkedIn is what I'm talking about here. So what nouns are you putting under your headshot, those bio bullets, before we get to the about section, before we get to the list of work experience? And what I was recommending to the MOA team today is that they think of that as first the title, so their actual title, and either comma Mall of America or at Mall of America. Then I use a space, vertical line, space. So those are my dividers. Some people do stars in between, but have it be a noun. So if you're a sales leader, put sales leadership. If you are an inventor, put innovation. If you're a technologist, put technology for one of your nouns, so that when someone goes in and is searching technology, they don't even know your brand. They don't even know who you are. You might pop up because that's in your bio bullets under your name. So this is if everyone who's listening right now did this on their LinkedIn the next time they went online, I guarantee you're going to be seen by at least twice as many people in the next week that have noticed you in the last 6 months. It's just amazing.
The other tip that I loved that Dan and I were both taking notes on to follow up on was within your About section, you recommended doing a bullet list of kind of some of those core you have to
areas of impact.
Areas of impact.
Right. So you want your About person to be in the first person. So if we know the difference between first and third person, a lot of people have it like a third person, as if it's a bio on a website or someone else is talking about Jill or Dan. Make it your voice. I am the at, and then the title at blah, blah, blah. And I oversee a team of that's responsible for $3 billion, whatever it is. If you can share numbers, put it there. And then you can say, prior to this role, I was at this brand for doing this, or maybe you're a long timer at the same organization. I have been at Mall of America for 25 years. Prior to being this leader, I covered this, I handled this, right? Those kinds of things. And then you can also share volunteer roles. You can share boards you serve on. So I recommend 3 short paragraphs. You could do 2, but if you can give us some white space in between, it's a much cleaner read. And then the last short paragraph, maybe it takes 2 lines, something personal. Is it, I and my husband live in the Minneapolis area with our 90 pounds of love, Kodak the dog. We enjoy reading and movies. Let's say it's that. I just made that up on the spot. We do have Kodak the dog. And that tells people right there, oh, she's married, she's a dog lover. Fun. She lives in the area. Maybe I want to connect with her, have coffee. So those are the kinds of things, because we want to think of LinkedIn as that one of those spaces, but a key space in the digital realm for brand ambassadorship. It's also a recruiting tool. So if people are wondering, wow, would I want to work for Dan Jasper? They might judge him just on that LinkedIn About section. If we see that you have hobbies or a family or you're a grandfather, whatever, oh, he's a human being. He's not going to be hard driving all the time. Okay? So these are the kinds of subtextual messages that a solid About section will give you.
I love all those tips from LinkedIn because I think it goes right back to the I.A.P. Like that's where you figure out your audience. It's a really easy tool to go on there. I run into very few people that don't have a profile. Great way to just learn who you're connecting with, get a little background information. I do love the recommendation of a little something personal. I've always wavered on that because I'm like, I don't want to lean too much into my personal side, but I think you can do it in a way that just humanizes you and makes
tasteful
you really
and human.
Personable. Absolutely. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to say, please, audience, don't judge me because I pretty much had everything incorrect on my LinkedIn.
No. You had a great wallpaper and a really nice headshot.
Okay, so
but you're
2.
considering a new headshot because we want to see your smile.
I am. And I have made a promise that in the next week I'm going to work on this. But I love LinkedIn because I have connected with so many people and I use it the same way you do, which is if I'm going to have coffee or meet with someone ahead of time, I always look at their LinkedIn to just refresh my memory of who they are, what they're about. And I also, as I'm walking to that meeting, I pull it up and I look at their headshot. So I remember I can recognize them when I walk in.
That's really good. Well, I love all these tips and believe it or not, we are at time. It goes so fast, but hopefully all of you listening and watching, hopefully you're ready on your LinkedIn, getting things updated, but take these tips and tricks in mind as far as it's really important to really have meaningful conversations with your colleagues, with your bosses, with the industry, and with your family. I mean, they're great tips. Just to have meaningful conversations and to be able to move forward and have continued relationships beyond that. So there's so many wonderful things that Roshini brings to us. And so definitely listen to her on the Crisis Files every week. That drops wherever your favorite podcast is broadcasted, but also an executive coach. You do a lot of public speaking engagements and just an amazing ambassador in our community. So definitely follow Roshini on LinkedIn, all your social networks from Instagram to Facebook, YouTube. So definitely check her out. Is there anything else you'd like to, how they can connect with you?
Well, we love it. We are really intentionally growing our Crisis Files family. We have a new library on thecrisisfiles.com. So it's really easy now. You just go right to the library. You get each season 1, 2, 3 split up, and you can listen to some of your favorite guests, Jill is actually a regular contributor on the Crisis Files. And so she has a few episodes over the 3 seasons that have dropped on there, and they're timeless. They're great tips. In fact, I'm reminded of last year's episode around this time, Spring break. Yep. And it was the hacks. Yes. Yes. And I think it was called Spring Me Outta Here. And you gave us some great spring break hacks of how to plan better. So we're very proud of the crisisfiles.com, the site itself, as well as all the podcast platforms where it lives. So we'd love it if you'd follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and X. And that's easy at the Crisis Files.
So that's going to do it for this episode of So Much More. So we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to So Much More, a Mall of America podcast. Subscribe wherever you find your favorite podcasts. This show is presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism.